Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is the first of two commentaries I'm doing on the 2002 series of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I don't like the way they do this beginning. It's not a good way to pay homage to the old opening sequence in any way. It's not funny, it's not clever, it's not going to surprise you more than once. And it's not really a very satisfying lead into the show in itself. So that's all thumbs down in the bad column for me. However, the series as a whole isn't all thumbs down in the bad column for me. We see there a writing credit for Larry DiTillio, a writer from the 1983 series, who did a lot of highly thought of episodes, I believe. And here, as I said on a previous commentary, I think Larry really helps the new series of He-Man find its feet, and particularly, and quite ironically I suppose, helps Orko find his feet in the series as a character. This series has, in many ways, started strongly and confidently. It's used a lot of the backstory from the old mini-comics and series, whatever it wants, very effectively, with the whole Skeletor, Keldor thing, and the Elders, and the Hall of Wisdom, and all that. It's established some characters very strongly and very well, such as Adam and Teela and their love-hate relationship. We can definitely see where they're going with that. But Orko, so far, hasn't really come out of the realm of stupid little bastard thing that they don't really know what to do with. And in this episode, Larry DiTillio shows us very clearly how to drag him out of that realm, as you should, and as he was often, usually, nearly always, in the old series. But unfortunately, the other writers don't really follow Larry's lead and continue to use Orko very well in the new series. And it does do the character a big disservice in many ways. But this episode is very good for Orko. And we see here, this could transplant all this stuff to the old characters, and you can have the old characters say the lines and they would sound exactly right and the sequence of events would be exactly right. Orko tries to help with the putting back up of all these statues and ends up causing complete chaos, and Man-at-Arms is annoyed with him. I mean, that's a very familiar sequence of events from the old show, and as Larry DiTillio proves here, it works very well as well with the new characters. And of course, Orko then goes on to prove himself later in the episode as a useful ally in his own way, despite feeling rather dejected here at his initial failure. And that works well as a character journey, and it's what we saw quite a bit in the old series, and as I say, it transplants well to the new series, and helps Orko find his feet. I do feel that Man-at-Arms and the Sorceress also get rather fleshed out here, thanks to their interactions with Orko, the interactions that Larry gives them. Man-at-Arms so far has been very just the sort of general character ordering the troops around, whatever, hasn't had much character. And there in that scene he interacts with Orko a bit, has shades of the old Man-at-Arms there. I do think Gary Chalk plays Man-at-Arms a bit too aggressive sometimes in this series. When he's telling Orko there what not to do, and rushing over to him and being so angry and so frustrated. I do think that's a bit much. With Alan Oppenheimer and the old Man-at-Arms, you could always tell that no matter how annoyed he was with Orko, he loved him really. But in that scene, it seems like the new Man-at-Arms just wants Orko to disappear from existence, which is a bit of a shame. But still, it does help to flesh Man-at-Arms out as a character, as a real person interacting with others and having real feelings, which is good for the episode. All this stuff with Skeletor and Evil Lyn talking about going to get the Ramstone could easily transplant to the old characters. And Skeletor is one of my favourite aspects of this new series. I think he's done really, really well, and you'll have to excuse me calling it a new series. It's actually incredibly old now, but it still seems new to me, and it's newer than the other one. So it is still, to me, new He-Man. I think the voice performance of Brian Dobson as Skeletor does a very difficult thing successfully. It's funny and scary in its own way, but it also pays very good, very clear homage to Alan Oppenheimer's performance from the olden days. And that was always going to be difficult to do with Skeletor. Make your own mark, but pay homage effectively, and Brian Dobson did that perfectly. So Skeletor is one of the things I most enjoy about this show. Adam, as I've said before, is a very strong character on this show, and I do enjoy him as a character. And here we see him after 6 minutes of the episode, and he doesn't really do or say anything very interesting in this episode, which also is kind of a symptom of Larry being a writer of the olden times. He is concentrating on other things in this episode, and so we see Adam mostly as He-Man, and when he's Adam, he's just sort of hanging around saying general things, Hands of Fire, Here We Come, etc. And that's not a bad thing at this point in the series. Perhaps Adam could do with a break as a character they're forcing in our faces. But yeah, as I say, it has definite symptoms of being written by a writer of the original series, and it helps the series find its feet in many ways, and makes some of the characters come across slightly differently than we've seen in the first 6 episodes of this series in some ways. Here we are with Orko and the Sorceress, and I think this is particularly good for the Sorceress here. She's been nothing as a character, absolutely nothing so far, and she is now interacting with Orko, having a bit of a laugh with Orko, talking to Orko about his feelings, sympathising with Orko and trying to help Orko with his feelings. I mean, wow, this gives the Sorceress 10 times more dimensions than she's had so far in this series, which is really, really good. It's very reminiscent of in the original series, where Orko does go to the Sorceress at one point and say, I am useless, send me home to Troller, and she shows him visions and persuades him that he's not useless, and the exact same sequence of events happens here. You can work out pretty easily that this stranger in the library is the Sorceress in disguise. She didn't bother disguising herself in the old series to show Orko visions of why he's useful, but this comes across and works quite well here, the stranger and his book of yesterdays. And what Larry DiTillio does very cleverly and very wisely here is establish Orko's backstory as being pretty much the same as in the original series. Orko the Great accidentally comes through from Troller, saves Adam and Cringer at the tar swamps. Clever bit of homage to the old series there. Orko lands upside down and says, hey, this world is upside down, the trees are upside down, which is reminiscent of what Troller looked like in the original series, upside down trees and so on. So perhaps from Orko's point of view, Eternia was always upside down. And instead of Orko's magic medallion here, we have his magic wand, and that's why his magic doesn't work so well anymore. The wand boosted it, and my magic doesn't work so well without it. And it's just a kind of throwaway thing, Orko's wand, to explain partly why Orko's magic goofs all the time, and I think that's an important thing to include in the series. It's not just that Orko is clumsy and careless. His magic has been badly affected, and he's still doing his best. They had a young actor called David A. Kay as Prince Adam in that flashback. Seems it's only 5 years ago. He is credited as Prince Adam age 11 in the cast, and as we know, Adam is now 16. So unlike in the old series, Orko's been on Eternia for about 5 years rather than about 10 years. But okay, no problem with that. David A. Kay returns to voice Prince Adam in a flashback in season 2 as well. And in that episode, he sounds distinctly older and, if not completely broken voiced, then very, very nearly completely broken voiced. And that works quite well as it goes. Adam in a flashback here, Adam slightly older in another flashback in season 2. And here we get all this stuff with Evil Lyn and the Faceless One and the Ramstone. The Ramstone's a MacGuffin. I mean, there's no other way around it. And the old series wasn't averse at times to using MacGuffins. And I do find them a little disappointing as a driving force behind an episode, but they work okay, and the Ramstone here works okay. Skeletor wants it. He's just discovered that Grayskull is where the Elder's power is. The Ramstone's going to help him break through any barrier. Okay, I'll buy that. I was rather disappointed when watching this through that in season 2 the Snake Men go after a few MacGuffins. It's like, what MacGuffin are we going to have this week to take over Eternia? It's rather lazy writing, really. But in this episode, where it's mainly about Orko and his history and his character and his interactions with others, and how he does come through in the end against Skeletor, the MacGuffin, the Ramstone to kind of drive things, that's okay. I don't have any problem with that. And it does, as I briefly mentioned, introduce the ongoing thing with Evil Lyn and the Faceless One. Of course, it turns out the Faceless One is Evil Lyn's father. He wants her to turn away from evil. I mean, if you call your child Evil Lyn, you shouldn't be surprised when she turns out to be evil, should you? But nevertheless, Faceless One wants her to turn away from evil. And at times he thinks that perhaps she will, and we have him again in season 2, with Evil Lyn involved. So it starts off something quite interesting in the context of the series as a whole, and it does have some quite interesting running plots and themes, this series, and makes interesting use of different characters with different interactions and different history, including Hordak and the Horde, and as I mentioned, the Snake Men. So it's quite interesting, quite intriguing. A good adaptation of He-Man from different sources, the old cartoon, the old mini-comics, the old, as I was saying, various different backstory and inspiration that all the characters had to try and come together and create the coherent universe of Eternia. And yeah, this is a pretty interesting, pretty good version of it. I mentioned all the Keldor and Skeletor stuff. They don't actually get round to specifying that Keldor/Skeletor and King Randor were brothers, like you can read in some of the backstory that may or may not have been included at some point in various comics or whatever. And they almost do get round to that in this series, and if they'd wanted to say at any point that that was the case, and that was why Keldor and Randor had such old and very deep felt beef, it would certainly have fitted in. So perhaps on some level to introduce at a later point in the series, if there ever was one. They were planning to do that, and they certainly could have done that very easily, and it would have been quite interesting. Who knew that Skeletor was He-Man's uncle? Well, just anyone who's read that particular piece of backstory that never actually ended up getting specifically included. This little flashback here where the sorceress reminds Orko how much joy and laughter he brings to the lives of the royal family, and that's important. It has Prince Adam aged 11 again, wearing the same clothes he had in the swamp, and yet Cam Clarke is doing his voice. Orko! I think it's a shame David A. Kay didn't say that Orko as well, just for consistency, but there we go. That only annoys me slightly when I watch this through. As I was saying earlier, Adam is a very strong character in this series, and carries the series well as a protagonist in many ways. But He-Man, conversely, as I have said before, is rather a different character in this series to Adam. He doesn't seem to channel Adam's personality and ideals and feelings. in the same way that He-Man in the old series did. And in some ways, I think He-Man in this series as a character is a bit flat, a bit boring. He's more of a construct than a person. He kind of says and does what the main hero of the series needs to say and do at various points, but he doesn't really come across as a real person with real feelings. Adam's feelings, a lot of the time, he doesn't come across with. And they kind of miss out on fleshing him out in that way, very unlike in the old series. It's a problem I've seen applied as criticism to Harry Potter before. There we go, there's the bit where Battle Cat's hat comes off. Larry DiTillio always wanted to have Battle Cat's hat come off, and now, in the new series, he can, because with his hat off, he doesn't look like Cringer. Great stuff. And when Larry DiTillio writes a Snake Man episode, that happens again. Yes, I've read it applied to Harry Potter. He's a construct. He just does and says what the main hero needs to do and say and doesn't really come across as a real person. And I think that's a fair comment about Harry Potter, although I think it's truer of He-Man in this series. I've recently been trying to read the Alex Rider books and haven't enjoyed them very much. And I've thought that about Alex Rider as a character. Just a construct hero main character. So I think the criticism can be quite fairly applied to those three characters. He-Man in this, Harry Potter, and Alex Rider, although I think the effect is extreme and detrimental to varying degrees. But definitely a point worth making about this series. Now, I'm not trying to say that He-Man isn't obviously also Adam at times, where he says he's borrowed the Sky Sword from Adam, hey, what a great kid and stuff. Yeah, we know they're the same person, but also He-Man has more in him than Adam in this, I think. Which is ironic, because he has less about him as a character than Adam. But he's also kind of channeling King Grayskull, isn't he? The barbarian hero, who's very like what the concept of He-Man as a character originally started out as. And I don't know, that should make him more interesting, He-Man, shouldn't it? But it doesn't. It just makes him more of a kind of construct, as I say. And it's more interesting, more fun, more compelling watching Adam in this series, which is very different from the old one. And I do like this sequence here, where Orko comes through and he pulls the old switcheroo with this useless old gourd and the ramstone. And Skeletor's awfully annoyed that Orko has got the better of him with his magic there. You tricked me! And he says things like that in a way that reminds me of Alan Oppenheimer, but obviously is his own spin as well, and is amusing, and also shows Skeletor as a very real threat. So that's brilliantly done, as I say. And I like the way Orko delivers the line here, in response to "you tricked me." Yeah, and now I'm gonna blast you. And Skeletor's a little alarmed by that. But unfortunately, Orko didn't remember the words to activate the Ramstone. But still, he keeps on distracting Skeletor while Adam turns back into He-Man and giving Skeletor the runaround and using Grayskull's illusions to discombobulate Skeletor. He does an excellent job there, Orko, and really comes through. And he doesn't usually do that, as I say, in this new series. He either just hangs around being pointless and annoying, or completely screws things up and doesn't make up for it. So thank goodness for Larry DiTillio giving Orko here a decent episode, certainly his best one in this new series. And it's nice to see him used in that way. I think Orko is more annoying in this series than in the old one anyway. I'm not sure quite how much to blame Gabe Kauth in his performance as Orko. I mean, as I was saying, he delivered that "I'm going to blast you" line awfully well there, and it's not like he does a bad performance, but I think the actual voice, the pitch they put on it, is more annoying than it needs to be, and does help with making Orko come across as I say, a stupid little bastard thing. So, on the whole, you have to write Orko very well and use him very carefully in order to make him come across in the right way in this new series. And Larry has done that here. But if you don't do it, and you don't make a special effort to do it, it's very, very easy to have Orko be rather an annoying part of the episode. And unfortunately, that's almost inevitably what happens elsewhere. So yeah, Orko does find his feet here. It's a shame other writers don't keep him on his feet. And I do think it's good, as I say, for Man-at-Arms, the Sorceress, having something of their old incarnations included in their characters, coming across as real people, real feelings, caring about Orko's feelings for a change. So that's good stuff. And when I was watching this series through, and I got to this episode, I thought, yes, that's better. That's the injection of life, of humanity, of character that the series needs. I used to say this series was over-reliant on battle sequences, the sorts of sequences that Filmation could never animate because they couldn't afford to. And it's not as bad as I first used to claim this phenomenon. But I do think it does have too many long battle sequences, and whenever anything climactic happens, like the Snake Men have taken over, Skeletor's taken Grayskull, all that happens to sort it out is a very long battle sequence each time. So I do think they're overused and badly used, and that's why episodes like this are a bit refreshing. They are about characters, character interactions, interesting themes and history, and there's a lot of that in the show as well. So I do find 2002 He-Man a mixed bag overall. Lots of very good aspects, lots of aspects that I would change quite a lot if I was making the series myself. Here is an aspect that I don't like so much in the new series. These moral segments, I think they do tend to take the piss at times out of the old moral segments, which isn't a good, effective way to pay homage to them, rather like with the opening sequence. But this one works pretty well. It's very like an old moral sequence, because of course it's written by an old writer. Your friends won't judge you when you make mistakes, they'll like you anyway. Well, that should be true, shouldn't it, Orko? Hopefully it is. Are you sure that's a stone dragon, says Ram-Man. Oh no, of course it isn't, and it ends up chasing Orko all over the place. A bit of gentle humour to end on. And that works very well, and backs up what we've learned from the episode. I don't know why Teela was credited in that closing sequence. She wasn't in the episode at all. And that's the end of that one. Hopefully you'll join me next time for my second and final commentary on the new He-Man series, on the episode Snake